Watch Dogs 2. San Francisco is basically your personal playground of digital chaos here. Instead of just shooting your way out of problems, you're manipulating city infrastructure to do the dirty work. You can hack a stranger's phone to frame them for a crime, watch the police arrive to arrest them, and use the distraction to slip into a heavily guarded server room. The driving physics are definitely on the arcadey, slightly weightless side, but the sheer freedom to approach infiltration however you want completely overshadows it. Grabbing a vibrant, massive, open-world sandbox for under $3 feels like you're pulling off one of the in-game heists. Metro 2033 Redux. Military-grade bullets are literally your money in this irradiated Russian subway system. Every time you pull the trigger in a panic, you are shooting your own wallet. It creates this agonizing tension where you constantly have to decide whether surviving a mutant attack is worth going broke. The stealth can sometimes feel a little old school and unforgiving, but the atmosphere is thicker than concrete. You'll find yourself manually pumping your flashlight just to keep the shadows at bay. Picking up a masterclass in survival horror for less than $1 is practically a mandatory purchase for anyone who likes their shooters with a sense of dread. Planet Zoo. Management games usually abstract their animals into simple moving hitboxes, but the creatures here have actual believable behaviors. You have to care about their privacy, their terrain preferences, and whether they have enough climbing space to stay mentally stimulated. The building tools give you an intimidating amount of freedom, letting you construct complex shelters piece by piece, which means the learning curve can absolutely kick your teeth in for the first few hours. Once it clicks, though, you will lose entire evenings just optimizing path layouts and breeding endangered pandas. Snagging a management sim this dense for just over $2 is an absolute steal. CARRION. Instead of playing the lone survivor hiding from the monster, you play the monster. You are a disgusting, amorphous blob of blood and tentacles tearing through an underground research facility, hunting the humans who imprisoned you. The way your mass fluidly squeezes through grates and rips doors off their hinges is mechanically satisfying in a way few platformers ever achieve. Getting lost in the map is a real issue since there's no traditional map screen, but stalking heavily armed guards and pulling them into the shadows makes up for it. Paying under $2 to be the final boss of a horror movie is a no-brainer. HITMAN World of Assassination. These levels aren't just maps, they are meticulously crafted clockwork puzzles where every NPC has a specific routine. You could just use a silenced pistol, but the real magic happens when you figure out how to disguise yourself as a fashion model to get close enough to push a billionaire off a balcony. The sheer volume of ridiculous emergent interactions means you can replay a single location 20 times and still find a new way to drop a chandelier on someone. Seeing this entire sandbox of creative eliminations drop this low is a rare excuse to load up your Steam cart immediately. Don't starve together. Surviving in a bizarre, gothic wilderness is stressful enough, but trying to do it while your friends accidentally burn down your berry bushes elevates it to pure comedy. Every season tries to kill you in a completely different way, from freezing temperatures to giant roaming deer-clops bosses. The inventory management can definitely get tedious when your pockets are full of rotting meat and twigs, but the desperate rush to prepare for winter with your buddies is unmatched. At this price point, you get a punishing, endless co-op survival experience that will test both your resourcefulness and your friendships. Black Desert. Most MMOs force you into a rigid loop of dungeon grinding, but here you can literally become a millionaire just by setting up a complex potato farming empire. The action combat is incredibly fluid, making every class feel like they belong in a fighting game rather than a point-and-click RPG. It is undeniably grind-heavy, and the UI will overwhelm you with notifications and systems within the first 10 minutes. But if you want a massive world where you can breed horses, sail ships, and build an economic trade route for less than the cost of a candy bar, nothing else even comes close. Wreckfest. Racing games usually penalize you for trading paint, but here, surviving a massive pileup is the entire point. The soft body physics engine ensures that every single crash crunches metal and bends axles in a horrifyingly realistic way. You can race a fully upgraded muscle car against a fleet of school buses and motorized sofas. The load times can be a bit sluggish, but the pure chaotic joy of slamming an opponent into a concrete barrier right at the finish line is flawless. Grabbing this engine of pure vehicular destruction for $3 is honestly one of the most entertaining investments on the storefront. Bendy and the Dark Revival. Walking through an abandoned animation studio where 1930s cartoons have mutated into hostile ink monstrosities creates a deeply unsettling vibe. The environmental storytelling does a lot of the heavy lifting, pulling you through beautifully twisted corridors that look like vintage sketches brought to life. The combat sections can feel a bit clunky and imprecise, but the stealth and puzzle-solving mechanics keep the pacing tight. Getting this level of polished, narrative-driven horror for $2 makes it incredibly easy to justify, especially if you want a creepy weekend playthrough that refuses to rely on cheap jump scares. The Invincible. Hard sci-fi is rarely captured with this much aesthetic precision. Everything relies on analog atom-punk technology. No magic holograms, just heavy switches, paper maps, and bulky radar equipment. You're piecing together a terrifying mystery on an alien planet that doesn't want you there. It is undeniably a slow burn, functioning more like a walking simulator with dialogue choices than an action game, which might frustrate impatient players, but the narrative branches aggressively based on your decisions, making your mistakes feel permanent. Getting a story this visually striking and well-written for under $3 is a massive win for sci-fi fans. Plague Inc. Evolved. Flipping the script to play as a deadly pathogen trying to wipe out humanity is bizarrely addictive. You have to constantly adapt your strategy, mutating your disease to spread through water supplies before researchers can develop a cure. Naming your virus something ridiculous and watching the global news ticker announce its terrifying spread never really gets old. The late-game scenarios can occasionally feel like a harsh random number generator punishing you, but the variety of plagues keeps things fresh. For $1.50, it's a brilliantly evil strategy game that easily eats up entire afternoons. Rain World. You are at the absolute bottom of the food chain in a rusted, decaying ecosystem. The AI driving the predators here are unpredictable. They aren't just pacing back and forth on a set path. They're actually hunting you, fighting each other, and adapting to the environment. The controls have a brutal learning curve, and the game explicitly refuses to hold your hand, which will absolutely result in dozens of frustrating deaths. But surviving a brutal storm and finding a hibernation chamber at the last possible second provides an unmatched adrenaline rush. Snagging this much raw survival tension for $2 is incredible value. Dragon Ball XENOVERSE Xeno 2. Building your own custom character and aggressively altering the established anime timeline is a brilliant power fantasy. The combat is flashy, fast-paced, and incredibly accessible, letting you chain together massive combos and iconic energy blasts without needing a degree in fighting game mechanics. The hub city can feel a bit hollow, and the grind to unlock specific ultimate moves is notoriously repetitive. However, the sheer amount of content packed into the base game offers dozens of hours of high-energy brawling. Finding a fighting game with this much single-player and co-op meat on its bones for $2 is an exceptionally rare. Barony. First-person dungeon crawling meets brutal roguelike mechanics in a voxel world that constantly wants you dead. You might step on a pressure plate, trigger a boulder trap, and wipe your entire co-op squad in 2 seconds. The sheer variety of classes and races means you can run a skeleton wizard or a goatman monk, each altering how you interact with the deadly environments. The UI definitely is a bit dated and finicky to navigate in a panic, but the chaotic multiplayer energy easily makes up for it. Paying $2 for endless hilarious dungeon runs with your friends is absurd value. Skull and Bones. Naval combat takes the absolute front seat here, stripping away on-foot exploration to focus entirely on building the most intimidating warship in the Indian Ocean. The sound design when cannons fire and the satisfying crunch of enemy hulls breaking apart feels incredibly weighty. The economy and resource gathering can turn into a bit of a repetitive chore, and it definitely lacks the swashbuckling on-land adventures many expected. But judging it purely as a ship battling simulator where you optimize loadouts to sink merchant fleets, grabbing it at a massive discount makes the maritime destruction completely justifiable. Far Cry 4. Kyrat remains one of the most visually stunning open worlds to just cause absolute mayhem inside. You can strap explosives to an elephant, ride it into an enemy outpost, and watch the entire military chain of command completely panic. The narrative and mission structures stick very safely to the traditional Ubisoft formula, meaning you'll be climbing a lot of radio towers. Yet the sheer freedom to approach combat with a wingsuit, a sniper rifle, or a wild animal makes the sandbox relentlessly fun. Scoring a massive, polished playground for less than a cup of coffee is an easy decision.
Metro Exodus, pulling the series out of the claustrophobic subway and putting you on a heavily modified steam train crossing a ruined Russia, fundamentally changes the survival dynamic. You're constantly scavenging for scraps to clean your weapons, because if your gun jams during a firefight with mutated beasts, you're dead. The voice acting can occasionally sound a bit wooden, breaking the immersion slightly during major story moments, but the detailed weapon customization and intense sandbox firefights are incredibly gripping. Finding an atmospheric, story-rich shooter of this caliber for $3 feels like you're robbing the Steam store.
The Binding of Isaac Rebirth. The sheer volume of bizarre, synergetic items you can discover turns every single run into a completely unique, often disturbing experiment. You might start off shooting basic tiers, only to find a combination of power-ups that turns you into a flying, laser-spewing demon that clears rooms in a second. It is notoriously difficult, and the reliance on RNG means sometimes you just get dealt a mathematically terrible run. However, the progression loop is so viciously addictive that thousands of players have dumped over 1,000 hours into mastering it. $1.50 for infinite replayability is the ultimate bargain. Titanfall 2. Movement mechanics have rarely felt this fluid and kinetic. You were seamlessly chaining wall runs, double jumps, and sliding maneuvers before dropping a massive, heavily armed mech from orbit. The single-player campaign constantly introduces brilliant level concepts, like a wrist-mounted time travel device, and then throws them away before they ever get old. The multiplayer population isn't what it used to be, so you are mostly buying this for the story. Grabbing what is widely considered one of the absolute best first-person shooter campaigns of the modern era for $3 is the easiest recommendation of the entire sale.